Michael J.B. Wood. Michael is married to Aya Fogelswood and is the father of 2 children, just so you know. For education and career, I don't have any information about his nursery school or public school, but high school at UCC in Toronto, where he not only got educated being a Governor-General's medalist, but also acted in leading roles in plays such as Arsenic and Old Lace, and in Gilbert and Sullivan operas such as The Mikado and HMS Pinafore. At the U of T, he earned a BA and an MA in French. And then he studied at Osgoode Hall Law School, York University, and was admitted to the Bar of Ontario in 1981. After a couple of years in private law practice, he worked as a bilingual legal counsel in the Toronto Regional Office of the Federal Government of Canada, advising on income tax enforcement. From there, he drifted on to the Government of Ontario, Ministry of the Attorney General, where he spent 32 years as a bilingual legislative counsel, drafting several major pieces of legislation. And as the head of the French section of the Office of Legislative Counsel, he led the preparation of the French version of the Revised Statutes and Revised Regulations of Ontario version of the Revised, of Ontario, yes. Blah, 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 blah. Babble. You did very complicated things there, Michael. His varied specialties include legislative drafting, choral singing, organizing children's programs. He also had the lifelong interest in languages, being fluent in English and French, and having a working knowledge of German and Italian. He has volunteered as the coordinator of the Church School of St. Thomas Anglican Church, Toronto, focusing on the curriculum of religious studies and on children's summer programs. He's also currently volunteering as a treasurer for both Sidreben and also for TLPA, or TLPA if you wish. For over 28 years, he has been a member of the choir of Toronto Classical Singers, and he has sung in the Latvian Song Festivals of 2014, 2019, and 2024. So, Michael, being very well qualified in French, let's hear what you have to say about Parīze.
Okay, thank you. Paldies, Labdien. I had the great good fortune of living in Paris for a number of years, from 1958 to 59, and again from 1965 to 66, because my father was a French professor at the University of Toronto, and he took the family on sabbatical leave, and I went to school in Paris as I was growing up. In addition, I spent summers of 1970 and 74 in Paris, and a number of winters in Paris as well. So I'm going to make this presentation a bit interactive. First, a question for you all. How many of you have visited Paris? Could you put up your hands? Oh my goodness, nearly the whole room. Okay, so this is going to make it challenging for me. I'm setting some objectives for myself. To show you photos of some places which you may not have seen and which are less crowded, and to relate the architectural style of those places to the history of the country and tell you a bit about the quirky bits of the history that I particularly enjoyed, to relate it to some other sites in France, but also related to French culture. One of the great advantages I found of being in Paris in the off-season, namely not in the summer, was that a lot of cultural venues opened up, and I was a great enthusiast of going to the theater, and I'll tell you a little bit about that later on. So first, a map of France. I hope this works. Yes, it does. Okay, Paris is the capital, and has been the capital since the 400s or so. France was originally founded as a Roman colony. In fact, the southern part, Provence, meaning province, meant Roman province. It was the first Roman province. In my presentation, I'm going to refer to a number of places in the south. One is Nîmes, which is somewhere, there it is. And then another is the city of Carcassonne down there in the south. There was one of the interesting things about French history was it was continual conflict with other nations. With England, the Duke of Normandy here invaded England in 1066. and the English king in the 1100s came from the Aquitaine region, Aquitania, through his wife. So England actually owned a fair bit of territory in France. France was fairly united as a country by about the 1300s, except for the eastern portion, and I'm also going to refer to, where there is still today a local language, Alsatian, which is closer to German than it is to French. Strasbourg is the main city, capital of the Alsace region. So, the French flag. I thank my lovely wife Aya today for decorating the tables with the inspirational idea of red and blue napkins and white tablecloths, the French colors, le tricolore. And also thank Matisse for helping in setting up the tables and the decorations. Now, there are many, many people who go into making TLPA a success, and I don't want to offend anybody by leaving out anybody, but I know that Ingo is also inspirational in preparing our lovely croissant and baguette with French cheeses, one hard, one soft, for us to taste today. The tricolore, the French flag, 3 colors. What do the 3 colors mean? Well, the white was the traditional color of the monarchy in France, and the blue and the red were the colors of Paris. As you can see here, the capital since 508 AD, and it was adopted as a flag of France during the French Revolution. When I was in France one summer, I have to show you this, a Phrygian bonnet that the with the colors of France on the side that the peasants wore during the French Revolution. Okay, I'll keep it on. I'll keep it on. Okay, now I hope this is going to work. I may need Matisse's help. I wanted to play you a clip of the Marseillaise, the French national anthem. We have to click on the red button there. Yes, okay, thank you. Yes. Thank you, Matisse. Well, it's very stirring and very militaristic and very gory as well, as you can see from the English translation of the words. It was written to inspire French troops in the Revolution. It was interesting psychologically that other countries tried to invade France because they didn't want this dangerous idea to catch on that maybe kings were not the best thing to have. So Austria, Prussia, and Britain all attacked France. But let's focus a bit on Paris now. Here is a map of Paris, and it started off on the island in the middle of the Seine River, where you have the Cathedral of Notre Dame. And it expanded gradually over the centuries. So my first question for you, what is the main characteristic of a Roman town? What do you think of when what's main characteristic? Arena, yes. That's the answer I was looking for. There is a Roman arena in Paris. Paris was known as Lutece, but there's very little left of it. Here is a much more impressive Roman arena in Nîmes in the south of France that I pointed out to you on the map. So if you want to see a really well-preserved Roman arena, go to a place like Nîmes or Arles. So that was Roman architecture. The next type of architecture is Romanesque architecture, kind of like Roman architecture, particularly in churches in the 11th and 12th centuries. They're characterized by rounded arches. Now, if you go to Paris, I was last in Paris in May of 2025. It was very, very busy around the Cathedral of Notre Dame. There was a huge lineup to get in. So I was with my son, and we went to a church in the Latin Quarter, Saint-Germain-des-Prés. You can see the rounded arches on it. It's the oldest church in Paris, built around 1200 or so. Why the name the Latin Quarter? Well, Latin was the language of the intelligentsia and the university spoken in the Middle Ages. It's the student university quarter. Just beside the church of Saint-Germain-des-Prés is the Café des Deux Magots, a coffee house that the intelligentsia frequented. Well, it was built in 1884. People like Sartre went to the Café des Deux Magots. The next era of architecture is Gothic architecture, where instead of having rounded arches, you have more pointed arches. Why? Because architects discovered that by using braces on the side, arc-boutants, flying buttresses, you could project the weight onto the side, and you could actually put windows in the church. You didn't need the whole strength of the wall to hold up the wall. One thing you'll notice about the history of Notre Dame is that it was built over about 200 years, as I indicate on the slide. When I gave my talk here on Rome, I think it was about 2 years ago, I mentioned that there wasn't much Gothic architecture in Rome, and I referred to what is my favorite church in France, the Cathedral of Amiens, which is just north of Paris, which has the distinction of being built in record time, in only, 80 years or so, and much more consistent architecture. For instance, in Notre Dame, you don't really see the front of it here, but there are three entrances, and two of them have more rounded entrances, and one has more of a triangular pediment to it. Whereas you see much more consistent architecture in Notre Dame in Amiens. I referred to earlier the island, the Île de la Cité, and right in the middle, the heart of Paris, where Notre Dame Cathedral is located, which is right there. You also have the law courts, which are here. And here's an interesting bit of trivia for you. The oldest bridge in Paris over the Seine is called the Pont Neuf, meaning new bridge. And a suggestion for you, if you can't get into Notre Dame, as I wasn't prepared to wait with my son, you can go instead to the Sainte-Chapelle, which is, I'll go back. Can I go back one slide? Yes. The Sainte-Chapelle is that tower in there. There it is. There it is. In the Palais de Justice, in the law courts, which is also in Gothic architecture, lovely Gothic architecture, late Gothic architecture, soaring windows known as Gothique flamboyant, flaming, like a flame of fire. Very impressive, letting in lots of light. Yeah. So now, another question for you. Now that we're in the Gothic, more medieval period, what was the main feature of any medieval city of any size, the most important feature you had to have in a medieval city? Maybe an aqueduct, but I'm thinking more in the city itself. No. Okay. For defense, a wall. Now you'll find only very, very few remnants of some of the old walls in Paris. But if you want to see a really impressive medieval wall, go to the south to Carcassonne. That's a picture of it. There's a perfectly preserved wall around the whole city. I find it useful in seeing the various sites to think of the styles and relate it to the time period. And so that's why I'm choosing a few examples of what you could see in Paris. Over on the left here is a former Archbishop's residence, the Hôtel de Sens. We're now in the 16th century, and the Renaissance architecture started in Italy, came to France. The most distinctive feature I see in it is these lovely decorative towers. And here's a bit of quirky bit of French history for you. The Hôtel de Sens is near the Seine in Paris. But there are many more castles in the style of Renaissance architecture in the Loire Valley, which is just a river valley, which is south, about an hour and a half train ride south of Paris, where nobles, but mainly the kings and queens of Paris had castles. This is one, the Château de Chaumont in the Loire Valley, that King Henry II gave to his wife, the Queen. But at the same time, back in those days, the kings were really rather naughty, and he had a long-standing mistress, Diane de Poitiers, to whom he gave this lovely castle, usually known as, regarded as a much nicer castle. Well, the king died suddenly in a jousting tournament, and when he died, the queen took over as regent, and she got her revenge. She forced Diane de Poitiers to give her Chenonceau and gave Diane de Poitiers Chaumont instead, which shows, never underestimate the power of a woman scorned. Okay, moving on in history. In a way, to me, the most impressive architectural style, Baroque architecture, which is very, very ornate. And here's an interesting story. I think I may have told you before about the origin of Versailles. France was a monarchy, and King Louis XIV in the 17th century decided to centralize power of government in his hands. He had come to the throne at a very young age, and a regent had reigned for the first 20 or so years. The regent was an Italian cardinal, Cardinal Mazarin, who was very unpopular, and the nobles staged a rebellion called La Fronde. And the king decided that he didn't want to undergo this terrible experience again. So when he took the throne, he moved the capital from Paris to Versailles and forced all the nobles to attend court there so we could keep an eye on them, make sure they weren't stirring up rebellion anymore. Now, what led to the foundation of Versailles? Well, Louis XIV had a finance minister, Nicolas Fouquet, who found some very capable artisans, Levaux, the architect, Lebrun, the painter, and Lenôtre, the gardener. And he built a tremendous castle himself, much more lavish than anything at the time, in a small place called Vaux-le-Vicomte, just south of Paris, and invited the king over. But the king was insanely jealous when he saw that his finance minister had a better castle than he did at the time. So he threw his finance minister into prison, took over those three main artisans, and decided to build the Palace of Versailles to show that whatever his finance minister could do, he could do better. He was known as the Sun King, and one of his famous phrases was "L'état c'est moi," I am the state. Yes?
When all the others took 80 to 100?
It is possible because Vaux-le-Vicomte was much, much smaller. Actually, it was really only that one building that you see, whereas on the picture that I show you here of Versailles, that's only the central part. There are two wings that extend out to the side. Plus, there were various building problems at Versailles. It was an example of real stubbornness. It was built on swampy land. They first had to drain the swamp. And perhaps another factor was the fact that Louis XIV was always engaging in wars, which cost a lot of money, and didn't always have the money to pay for his building projects. So it did take that long time to build. Another interesting quirk of history is this. I remember earlier I told you about rivalry between France and various countries, rivalry between France and England. There was also rivalry between France and Germany when Louis XIV took over the eastern part of what is now Paris, Strasbourg, Alsace. It was originally German. Louis XIV took it over, made it French. The Germans founded their empire in 1871, and by having a conflict, armed conflict with the French, and actually invaded Paris and decided to really rub it into the French. So they took this wonderful hall of mirrors in Versailles and used that as the place to proclaim the German Empire. Well, not happy with that, the French decided to get their revenge, and in World War I, when the Allies beat Germany, there was the Treaty of Versailles to conclude the war, and it was signed in the very Hall of Mirrors, France showing that they're going to get their own back on Germany. And at the side here is the famous painting of King Louis XIV. Okay, the 17th century is really my favorite. It showed, there was experienced a vast flowering of arts and music. And I have to tell you about my favorite French author that you probably have heard of, Molière, who wrote comedies. They satirized men and women with obsession. So in Tartuffe, there was a religious hypocrite who was so influential in the family because the head of the family, the man, was just completely obsessed with him, thought that whatever Tartuffe did could do no wrong. If you want to see a Molière play, you can come tonight or tomorrow night to see a student performance at the University of Toronto actually it's not really a student performance, it's a student alumni performance. It's at the Isabel Bader Theatre on the campus of the University of Toronto, performance of L'Avare, the Miser. And then I want to tell you a little bit about Molière's last play, Le Malade Imaginaire, the hypochondriac. The hypochondriac was a man obsessed with doctors, so to the point that he wanted to marry his daughter off to a doctor. And he always thought, of course, that he was sick, and whatever doctors said was just gospel. The theory of laughter in the book of Henri Bergson, Le Rire, is that laughter is something which makes human behavior mechanical and predictable, so it's dehumanized. The interesting thing about this last play of Molière was that he performed as the hypochondriac, the main character himself, while he was deathly ill, and following a performance, he actually died. So it's really quite poignant that he was performing as a hypochondriac, an imaginary invalid, but he actually was very sick himself. In one of the final scenes, his servant, lady servant Toinette, pulls a trick on him. She dresses up as a doctor and attributes all his unrelated symptoms and even his natural reactions to lung disease. So you have the constant repetition of lung disease. He says, "Well, doctor, the doctor says, would you have a headache? Oh, must be lung disease. Do you have stomach pain? Oh, must be lung disease. And do you like to eat a lot? Oh, well, that's a symptom of lung disease. And after you eat, do you feel somewhat sleepy? Oh, lung disease. Well, what do you prescribe, doctor? Well, eating good steak and drinking good wine is the cure. Okay, that's a view from the stage, and the chair is actually the old chair that Molière sat in when he performed in the role as Le Malade Imaginaire. Also in this time period, if you take a boat trip on the Seine, you'll see the Institute of France, where the Academy of French Language, the Académie Française, was founded in the 16th century. And I have to tell you a little amusing quirk here. It's governed by 40 intellectuals, writers, who are elected and who are known as les immortels, the immortal ones. It shows you how seriously the French take their history and their language. Now, I know I'm focusing a lot on architecture here, but it really is typical of people who live in Paris. I mean, ordinary people. My music teacher, when I was in Paris, as a leisure activity, they go out on weekends for lectures and conferences, and walking conferences, to go around and visit the various sites. It's very much part of the culture. When I stayed in Paris most recently in May of 2025 with my son, I was in a hotel on the Avenue Émile Zola, and we went for dinner in a restaurant called Germinal, which is a reference to the famous writer Zola, who wrote a whole series of novels, the most famous one of which is Germinal, a story of miners going on strike and the very poor working conditions of the working class in the late 19th century. You probably have heard of the Dreyfus affair that Émile Zola was instrumental in, defending the French military officer, an Alsatian Jewish man, Alfred Dreyfus, who was accused of treason, and with hardly any evidence. And he suffered for 12 years imprisonment before they finally retried him and exonerated him. Not a too glorious era in French history, but much more glorious era is the Napoleonic era. Now, the Hôtel des Invalides was a military institution before Napoleon came along, but it's, I think, the most impressive dome in the whole of Paris, the gold gilded work on the top. There's a statue of Napoleon with his characteristic hand in his waistcoat. So here is another poll for you. How many of you have heard of the French comic book series Astérix the Gaul? Oh, good. A few. French comic books are part of French culture too. It's not just for children. It's very much satirical for adults. Astérix the Gaul is a fictional series about a little village of Gauls who are in Gaul at 50 BC, when the Romans had conquered the whole country except for a little village. Why? Because the druid in that village had a secret potion that gave them superhuman strength to resist the Romans. And I couldn't resist putting this in, the allusions that you see to French history. In one episode, the druid who makes the magic potion gets amnesia, and they take him off to the doctor. And they look at various patients there, and they say, well, one patient, this person thinks he's Julius Caesar. And this person here, well, nobody knows who he thinks he is, because he thinks he's Napoleon Bonaparte, which came about 2 centuries or 2,000 years later. The next period, I have to move on. A classical architecture in the 18th century using Greco-Roman elements. The Place de la Concorde, big square. The site of the guillotine during the French Revolution, which was purposely renamed as Concord, or Peace, after the Revolution. An interesting bit of trivia for you here. Around the perimeter are statues of 8 French cities, one of which is Strasbourg. And when the Germans held it from 1871 to 1918, they draped it in black because they were in mourning for the loss of Strasbourg. what I have to show you of the most striking vista in Paris, which I'm sure many of you have seen, the triumphal way, la voie triomphale, perfectly symmetrical, starting in the courtyard of the Louvre, the former royal palace that's now a museum. There's the modern pyramid of 1989, and there is a dead straight line, 4 kilometers up to the Arc de Triomphe of Étoile, and 4 kilometers beyond that. And I'll show you bits of it. So it starts there, the axis. That's the Napoleonic triumphal arch in the gardens of the Louvre. And if you look carefully, you can see underneath, here, underneath the main archway, you can see an Egyptian obelisk and another triumphal archway, the Arc de Triomphe of Étoile in the distance. Absolutely dead straight line. There, that's the view from the Place de la Concorde, and that's the triumphal arch that Napoleon built to celebrate his victories in the early 19th century. And if you go on past that, you see the modern arch that was built by French President François Mitterrand, had it built in 1989. So, question for you. What other world capital gives you the same impressive, dead straight vista? Yes, absolutely. Yes. The line from the Capitol, the Washington Monument, the Jefferson Monument, the White House. Oh, Lincoln, sorry. And the Jefferson Monument is down there. Yes, the dead straight line. Why? Because it was designed by a Frenchman, Pierre L'Enfant. Another interesting factor here I find is that, the illustration of the theory that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The French liked helping the Americans against the English in the American Civil War independence. Anybody fighting the English was okay by the French. In the 19th century, neo-Baroque architecture, the old Opera House, Charles Garnier, designed by Charles Garnier. I have to mention Baron Haussmann as well. He was a great builder under Napoleon III. There is the inside of the opera. Absolutely stunning. Another bit of historical trivia. The 19th century was very turbulent for France. It went through republics, had 2 empires, had restoration of monarchy. Well, when the monarchy was restored, the last king of France before the revolution was Louis XVI. The monarchy was restored under Louis XVIII. There was no Louis XVII. They wanted to pretend that there hadn't been any interruption. And similarly with the empire, there was an Emperor Napoleon I, and when his nephew came to take over in 1852, they wanted to pretend that there had been no interruption in the empire. There was no Napoleon. There had been a Napoleon II, but actually there wasn't. It was Napoleon III who took over in 1852. Okay, what you must know the best, the symbol of Paris, the Eiffel Tower, but which actually is relatively recent. It's interesting example of the architecture of the Industrial Revolution, using steel to build, which it makes it very durable, but also very little weight on the ground per square centimeter. And if we can get this, you can see that now. Matisse, can you press the button on this? You can see yes, thank you. The way it glows and the light at the, did I do that? Sorry, we should go back. Yeah, and the light which goes around at the top. Very impressive. Okay, let's see. That's about all for the architectural styles. This one, very well-known church, Sacré-Cœur, on the highest place in Paris, Montmartre. It used to be not too crowded. Now it's terribly crowded if you go there. But picturesque. The church is in Byzantine style. The square of Artis, as they say, is very crowded. So I have a suggestion for you. If you want to see something more sort of typically Parisian, I lived in the 17th arrondissement or district in Paris for a number of years in the summer. A local market, local boulangerie or bakery. And then I have to credit and there's a cafe and dinner with my son John, who likes his salmon dinner in a cafe. But I have to credit my wife, because when we went to Paris in 2015, she forced me to look at some things other than just architecture, but picturesque things, doorways, 19th century doorways. So there is Aya with a lovely picturesque doorway in 2025. The door is obviously sort of 19th century style. And even there I am in front of another doorway where you even have little engravings in the door. This is a sort of Art Nouveau entrance to the one of the subway stations, typical of style around 1900 or so. And so I'm going to conclude with some interesting quotations. One praising Paris, Henry Miller, an American who lived in Paris. When spring comes to Paris, the humblest mortal alive must feel that he dwells in paradise. And some interesting comments by General Charles de Gaulle, who was also president of France. Comment voulez-vous gouverner un pays où il existe 246 variétés de fromage? How can one govern a country that has 246 types of cheese? Which reminds me of the saying that Aya told me about Latvians, where there are 4 Latvians, there are 5 churches. But it shows that it shows mental creativity. And I particularly want to finish with this one of General Charles de Gaulle. La vieillesse, c'est un naufrage. Old age is a shipwreck. But not as long as we have TLPA, because it keeps us stimulated mentally and physically and socially. And it's just a great, great gathering. And I really, really appreciate it in my retirement and your fellowship. And thank you all for inviting me.
Are there any questions?
I have a comment. I like that you related how the architecture is in France as well. Sorry, Paris is to Washington, D.C., but have you heard recently that Trump is having an Arc de Triomphe built in Washington? I thought you might have added that, but I did 250 years of independence. Yeah, I didn't know if you or anybody else knew that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Another question?
When you climb to the top of the arc, the triumphant arc there, there's a restaurant. What's the quality of food there?
Well, with my son John, I climbed to the top of the triumphant arc at Étoile, known as Star, the top of the Champs-Élysées. There is no restaurant there, but there is a restaurant in the Eiffel Tower. I've actually never been up to the very top of the Eiffel Tower. I'd never been to a restaurant there. The best I could manage was climbing up on the stairs to the second level. It was about 660 stairs. I climbed up with my son John when he was age 9. There's a real trooper to do that with me. So I can't answer your question about the restaurant, but I can tell you that you get, not surprisingly, great food in just local restaurants. We went to, as I say, a local restaurant just in the hotel where we're nearby where we were staying.
Another question over here.
When's your next lecture and what's it going to be about?
Well, I'll have to coordinate with the TLPA board. I mean, my absolute love is European history and architecture, as you can see, so I would bet that I would choose something from Europe.
It's part of Europe.
That might be a little presumptuous of me to speak about Latvia, but maybe I could do a twist on it, such as German influences in Latvia. I was really impressed. Yeah, I was really impressed when the one time I went to Riga. I mean, lovely city. Go into the cathedral and see inscriptions in German, because I studied German as a teenager. And it's something that I can understand. I only know a few words, unfortunately, of Latvian. Yeah. Oh, the Art Deco on the things like the Elizabeth era, really super impressive. Reminds me a lot of the Baroque style, the swirls, the curves. Yeah.
When you were showing actually, when we were hearing the Marseillaise, it reminded me of the Eugene Delacroix's painting, Liberty Leading the People,
Yes.
where the flag is there going forward, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you, Michael. I think we almost have to wrap up, but I'm just wondering, how do you kind of fulfill your need for France and Europe when you're here in Toronto?
You're right. It is a challenge, but so far I've done a number of things. When there is an opportunity to attend a French play, I will attend. I'm attending tomorrow, actually, with my son. It's given in French with English surtitles. So, if you don't speak a lot of French, you can follow the English surtitles. I put a plug in for York University, even though that wasn't the university I graduated from with a BA and MA. They're exceedingly generous to seniors. You can take courses just by paying this small incidental fee, and I've been taking ongoing courses with them and extending my knowledge of French literature. My professor said to me recently recommended I do a doctorate, but I have to check with my wife because she's not too happy that I spend time on TLPA and SID finances. I might be even less popular if I had my nose constantly in books.
Well, thank you very, very much, Michael. It's been a pleasure. And a little token.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And so your next talk.
Thank you.
Un tad līdz nākošajai nedēļai. Mīļš, paldies par jūsu uzmanību.